And there he is, Mr. Larry Rolla. Larry, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well.
First off, I want to thank you. We done an episode a while back, and you know, some things happened though with my channel and stuff like that. And I'm just very grateful though that you were willing though to come back on and do this again. And I just want to start off though fresh and take it right back from like as if we didn't even do it before, and just started off from like I tell everyone where you're from, and we'll just go back and forth from there. Where'd you grow up, and take it from there.
Okay. Well, good thing you caught me now because my memory is I'm losing my memory rapidly, and that's a concern. I'm having a lot of trouble, and the worst part is the movie and the TV series is getting very close, and the closer that's getting, the more I'm losing my mind. Anyway, I was born and raised in New York City and down in Little Italy. And when I was about 5 years old, my parents moved to Queens, and that's basically where I grew up until I left home at the age of maybe right out of when I was 16. They just threw me out of school, and I left home at that time. And I had a passion for ever since I was a kid for racing cars and just speed, just very very competitive, and that took up most of my time. Even though the area I grew up in, there was a typical Italian area, gangs on the corner, mob guys all around the place, every area from Corona, Queens to all over. And I escaped that only because it was follow the leader kind of thing. You just had to be part of a crew, and that wasn't me. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, and I guess that attitude saved me from getting involved in all that mob stuff.
So you didn't want to kick up. You didn't want to do your thing and have to kick up to these guys. You wanted to be your own leader.
Well, yeah, it wasn't even kicking up at that point. At that point, it was like if the gang robbed a car, I would be part of the gang, and maybe I didn't want to go where they were going. I just want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So what I started doing is rob my own car by myself, and I
There
just
you
couldn't
go.
follow the leader. I couldn't do that. And then as you get older, you learn more and more. If you do get involved in that situation, just like the guy behind you, Whitey Bulger, John Gotti, and
Tony. Yeah.
Tony. You get involved, and then and then you're in a whole society, and I that wasn't me. So anyway, I started racing cars. I started building cars from when I was 7, 8, 10 years old. And by the time I was 14, 15, I was racing I had stock cars, I had dragsters, I had roadsters racing at West Hampton. And to support that habit, I became a thief, just doing all stupid kid shit. To start from robbing hubcaps to robbing gas stations, to do whatever I had to do to buy the parts that I needed to replace that blew up in the car. And I got a job in a gas station, and one day a horse van pulled in, and I found out that you could race horses for money. And my whole thing was just competitive, whether it be a skateboard, a wagon. I had to win. I wanted to win. I was very competitive like that. So the cars excited me because I mean I was going a quarter of a mile. In a quarter of a mile, I was doing it in like 11 seconds, 100 miles an hour in 1956, and that kind of excited me. The stock car racing excited me, but I wound up with a room full of trophies and blankets, but no money. And so when the horse van pulled in, I was talking with the guy, and he told me that you could race horses for money, and they gave me. I think I won the first seven races out of, I think I started 10 or 11 times. I won the first 7 and finished second the rest of the time. And they gave me a full page write-up in the newspaper.
Nice.
And it was like, here I was 19 years old, 18 years old, and I was like a superstar. I had a full page write-up in the newspaper, and the phone start ringing, and I was, I was really on my way. But let me step back. Let me step back 1 year, because what happened was when I went to Buffalo to get my license, my harness license to drive in the train harness horses. When I came back to New York and I applied for stalls to race at Roosevelt Raceway, that's the track that was open at the time, and they denied me stalls. Now, I called up my mother. I'm going to have to back way up. I'm going to have to back way up because I left too much out. All right, so now I was I start racing. I went from go-karts, skateboards to go-karts to wagons to I built a stock cart and I raced at Freeport on Saturdays. I built a dragster and roadster that I drag raced on Sundays. And that's what I really love to do. And that's what kept me out of the mob, because I was surrounded by it growing up. And like, I just couldn't follow the leader. So I just kind of went my own way. I had the attitude. I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And that's exactly what I did. And I lived my whole life like that. So anyway, to fix the cars that I was racing, because you blow an engine, you blow a clutch, you need new, whatever you needed. I started hubcaps, then it went to robbing gas stations, then it went to just a lot of bad stuff just to pay for the repairs that I had to make. And one day I blew an engine in the dragster I had. It was in 1955, and I blew an engine, and I needed about $300 or $400 to buy a junkyard engine.
And this is back on what year?
This was in 1955.
So $300-$400 is a lot of money then, yeah.
Yeah, and so when I was robbing the gas stations, you get $30, $40 tops, and I had to make a big score. So there was a gas station on Astoria Boulevard and 112th Street that had a grand opening. And they had all new, and I passed by there. I stopped in there for gas, like the case of the place. And he had all brand new tires, all brand new transmission jacks. He had everything, because automatic transmissions were just coming into the picture at that time. Before that, all the cars were standard shift. So I says, that's the place I'm going to rob. So the following day, I got a hold of a friend of mine. It was the first time I ever did anything with somebody else. Whatever I did, whether it be robberies or whatever, it was always by myself. But I knew I couldn't lift them new transmission jacks up by myself. They were big and they were heavy, and they were the ones that took these big automatic transmissions and brought them down. And so he had 2 of them. So I got a friend of mine, and we robbed a little box truck and broke into the place in the middle of the night. And between me and him, we wiped out the whole place, all the brand new tires, the transmission jacks, his cash, everything. And my friend had a guy out in Long Island that we sold everything to. And then life went on. And about 3 months later, Detective Sands come to my house, and they arrested me. They found the owner of the place that we robbed. He went from gas station to gas station to gas station. Must have been that whole 2-3 month period, because nobody had them transmission jacks. They were just coming out, and they were brand new. They were red. And he used to pull and pass by every gas station and just look in. And I guess he spotted them because they had them. Make a long story short, they arrest me. and they arrest me. And Detective Sands takes me up to the third floor detective room, and they asked me to sign a confession, and they wanted to know who I was with, and I refused to answer anything, and they hit me, and I hit them back and forth. And the bottom line was, um, I wind up. They handcuffed me. Well, Detective Sands walked from around the desk, and he says, "Save yourself a lot of trouble and sign this sign this." And I said, "I'm not signing nothing." And he slapped me. When he slapped me, I hit him, and they handcuffed me. The other two detectives handcuffed me immediately behind the chair, and they went and they got a big law book and they bashed me over the head with it. And before you know it, my nose started bleeding, my ears started bleeding, everything started bleeding. They uncuffed me. They said, "Sign it." I didn't sign it, and they hit me again. I kicked them. I wind up on the floor. They crawled into the corner. They jumped on me. I wind up in a hospital with 6 or 7 broken ribs, a broken ankle, skull fracture, broken nose, the whole bit. Back then, it wasn't like you have the right to remain silent. You have a right to, it
Yeah.
wasn't like
Yeah.
that.
We'll make you stay silent.
Yeah,
Boom.
yeah. The first thing they do is they take a pair of pliers from the drawer and they put it on the desk. And usually, I had no fingernails, I used to bite my nails at the time, but they grab your fingernail, and if you didn't sign it, they just ripped your fingernail out. But I had no nails, so that's what happened. So anyway, now I'm in the hospital, and my mother comes and gets me after a few days, and I said to well, first they put me in jail. They put me in the Tombs. After that beating, I was all busted up, and they just threw me downstairs in the basement of 114 precinct. They had the Tombs. The Tombs are 3 cells down in the basement. No light, no nothing. 3-4 inches of water on the floor. Cats, rats down there as big as cats. And they left me there until that was Friday night, I think. And they left me there till Monday morning. Monday morning, they take me to Queens Boulevard, the courthouse. And I'm all busted up. And my mother bails me out. And I said, "Ma, you got to get me to the hospital. I can't breathe. I'm having trouble breathing. The pain is just bad. I was 2 days in the Tombs, and it was just tough." And my mother said to me, she says, "I'm taking you where I should have taken you a long time ago." And the reason she said that was because I was not a good kid. I did a lot of stupid things and drove my mother crazy. So she takes me to her boss. Her boss was, and this is a name you'll probably recognize, was Tommy Lucchese. Uh, in fact, the one of the 5 mob families still carries his name, Lucchese crime family.
Yeah.
And he was, my mother ran all his dress factories. And she brings me up there, and I guess she told him about me. And when we got up there, he asked my mother to leave the room, and he says to me, he says, "Listen," he says, "your mother is a good lady. She's my friend, and you're breaking her heart with all your nickel and dime bullshit. And she's not happy with that." And he says, "But I'll make you a deal. You think about what I said, and if you want to straighten your life out, I'll help you in every way, and every problem that you have and that you might have will go away."
And this is Tommy Three Finger Rat Lucchese who's
Yeah,
telling you this.
yeah, he told me that. So he calls my mother back in the room, and I mean, the conversation went on a little longer than that, but
Yeah.
it was the first time that I you're so selfish when you're 14, 15, 13. You're so selfish. It's like all about you, and when he was telling me this, I was thinking about, here's my poor mother working her ass off, running all his factories, and and what he says is true. I drove her crazy. I drove her nuts, and I never thought of it before. And and I was like ashamed, and so anyway, in the car, I said, she took me to the hospital, and that's when they patched me all up. I had a broken ankle, 6, 7, 8 broken ribs, a broken nose. I had a skull fracture. I had blood because I never took a shower. Still had all that dry blood in my ears and my nose. All my clothes were covered with blood. And so I go home, and I got a job in a gas station. I figure, well, I get a job, and my pay will pay for the parts. I won't have to go steal, and I'll just become. I'll stop all of that. And that's what I did. I got a job in a gas station, and that's what whatever money I was making, I was repairing the cars and everything was going along fine. And then one day a horse van pulled in, and he asked me fill it up with gas and asked for a bucket of water. And he hopped up on the truck, and there were 3 horses in the truck. And he was giving the water to the horses. And I says, where you going with them horses? Because the only horse I seen up to that point was the horses pulling the wagons that were collecting newspapers or selling fruit. And he told me that I was going to Yonkers Raceway. And after a long discussion we had, I found out that you could race horses for money instead of trophies and blankets that I got when I was winning all these races. So he invited me out to the farm. I went to the farm, and I never left. I stayed there for 2.5, 3 years, learned everything there was to know about horses. And these were the trotters. These were not the thoroughbreds. These were the trotters. And that's what excited me, because you could drive them yourself. You hook them up to a jog cart, and for the race, a race bike, and you race them yourself. And that's what I was all about. So that went on, and after 3 years, he sent me up to Buffalo racetrack, and it was there that I got my license to drive and to train officially. And but they give you a provisional license first, like an apprentice license. And I went back to New York, and in New York they have 2 of the major racetracks back at that time, 2 of the biggest racetracks in the world, Yonkers and Roosevelt. Well, at the time, Roosevelt was open, and naturally they had all the best horses there, the best drivers, the best trainers, the best everything. But I was naive. I didn't know that end of the business. So I applied for stalls, and they denied me. So I called up my mother, and I said, and prior to that, when I came back from Buffalo, I called up my mother, and I said, Ma, I got my license to train and to drive, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to stay in the horse business. And she was so happy, because for 3 years, 3 years, she never got a phone call that I was in jail or that I was whatever. And she was so happy. And so
Larry, were you the only child?
no, I had a brother and sister, but they were younger.
Okay.
And I was the oldest one. My sister was 5 years, 6 years younger. My brother was 3 years younger. So at this time they were just in their 12s, 13. So but they were good kids. My brother went into the Navy. My sister got married. They were normal. I was
you're the black sheep.
Yeah, the black sheep. So anyway, my mother calls me up the next day, and she says, I told Tommy Lucchese what you said, and he was very happy, and he asked to see me. So I drive back in, and he hands me an envelope, and he says, here, do whatever you have to do with it, and if you need more, just let me know. So I get home, I owe is $20,000. So with that $20,000, I bought 4 racehorses, and I applied for stalls at Roosevelt Raceway. They denied me the stalls, and the reason they denied me, naturally, I know now. Back then, I figure, well, I have horses. Why don't they give me stalls? So I called up my mother. I says, Ma, I says, I don't know what to do. I says, Tommy gave me $20,000, and I bought the horses, and now they won't give me stalls. I can't race, and I don't know what to do. So she says, well, she says, let me talk to Tommy. So she talks to Tommy. The next day she calls me up and she says, you can ship your horses to Roosevelt Raceway. There'll be 4 stalls waiting for you. So I says, how did he do that? What did he do? And the windup was that Roosevelt Raceway at the time was owned by Morton Levy. Morton Levy was the attorney for Frank Costello, for all the mob guys. He owned the racetrack. So all it took was one phone call and I got whatever I wanted. All right, so now I get there and I got lucky right away. Out of the first 10, 11 races, I think I won 7 or 8 of them. And I get a big write-up in the newspaper. And a whole page write-up. And the phone start ringing. And here it is, a kid my age, all of a sudden was put on a pedestal that I'm the next coming of Christ. I just was like the new phenomenal young trainer driver. And the phone started ringing, and I was given opportunities that I couldn't believe. So anyway, I have to skip along because we'll be here for 100 hours. So I just have to skip along. So after what happened then was I made the mortal sin. I made a mortal sin. I fell in love with one of the horses that I bought, that I owned myself. And I asked the race secretary to take him out of claiming races and put him in a condition race. And I won't go into that. But anyway, I raced the horse, and he went off 4-5-1. And this was at Yonkers Raceway. I got the big write-up, and all the good I did was at Roosevelt. And every 3 months, they go from track Roosevelt, 3 months at Yonkers, 3 months at Roosevelt, back and forth. They were only like 20 miles apart. One was in Yonkers, one was in Hicksville. So in Westbury. So I get there. I get to Yonkers. I put this one particular horse in. He had won 3 races in a row, and that's why I wanted to move him up in class, which I did.
Is this the horse that you fell in love with?
Yeah, this is the horse I fell in love with. And I didn't want, he was in claiming races. I didn't want to lose him. So I took him out of claiming races and I put him in a condition. A claiming race is a race where anybody, any owner or trainer can claim him, can buy him right out of the race. I didn't want to lose him. I fell in love with him.
Yeah.
So I take him out of them and I put him in a condition race. A condition race is much tougher horses. They're a lot better horses. And I raced him. And I finished. I didn't want to abuse him because he wasn't a sound horse. I bought him cheap. He wasn't a sound horse. I claimed him out of a race for $2,500 at Roosevelt. And I beat the 4,000 claimers. I beat the 5,000 claimers. I beat the 8,000 claimers. And that's when I says, I don't want to lose this horse because he went in hand both times. So, but now he's in a race with much better horses. So the race goes, and I says to myself, I don't want to lose. I don't want to abuse this horse. He's not a sound horse. Took a lot to get him racehorse sound every week, and I don't want to abuse him. So I sat in, and I figured down the stretch if I can get out. But what happened was there was the biggest gambler at the track. His name was Morty Finder. He used to bet. He was the biggest bettor at the track, and he was partners with the owner of the racetrack, whose name was Marty Tannenbaum, who owned Yonkers Raceway, and they would bet together as a team. And he called up, and I found this out years and years later, that they bet $10,000 on me. He called up Marty, had his own phone at the table in the dining room up to Tannenbaum's office. And he called up and he says, all right, we're going to bet $10,000 on the kid. So Tannenbaum said, who's the kid? And he said, Larry Rolla. He's driving the 4 or 5 horse. He said, okay. So now the race goes off. I get locked in. And I'm looking for room to get out for finishing down the stretch. And there's no room for me to get out. And I finish climbing right over the horse that win, right over his back. And they made a big stink about it. They said I stiffed the horse, which I didn't. If there was room to get out, I would have won easy, but there was no room. So Tannenbaum calls the presiding judge. The judge calls me in. He says, Tannenbaum says you have 48 hours to get off the grounds. And there was no recourse then, because at that time when I called my mother and I told her what happened, she says, well, I can't bother Tommy now because he's in the hospital. He has a malignant brain tumor and he's not in good shape and I can't bother him. So, do whatever you have to do. So they barred me from all New York tracks, and I had to go to all of these small Mickey Mouse tracks all around the country. And after 3-4 years of that, I was starving to death. I was just in bad shape. You race for no money, and two of the horses I had were they didn't even write races for them at the smaller tracks. They were too good. So two of them I couldn't even race. The two cheaper horses I could race, but it wasn't enough to pay the bills for all of them, and I didn't know what to do. 6 months later, Tommy Lucchese dies of brain tumor, cancer, and I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't abandon the horses. I was at these small racetracks like at Green Mountain Park and whatever, and there was no people that had money to buy these horses, so I had to stick it out. And then one day, I heard that they were opening Lincoln Downs, and it was the first time that in the Boston area that they were going to have standardbred racing. There was always a thoroughbred racetrack, and I applied for stalls there, and the purses there were a lot bigger than where. So I was all excited that they gave me stalls there, and it was the first time ever that they had harness racing anywhere in that state. And they gave me stalls. I entered some horses, and the morning of the race, I'm sitting in the shed row, and I had two favorites in, and I was so excited that I could win both races. I was racing for a lot of money compared to where I was, and I couldn't wait to race. And all of a sudden, I'm in the shed row reading the program, and I see these three gigantic guys walking down the shed row. They look like the front line of Green Bay Packers. And they reached me and they said, you Larry Rolla? I said, yes. What can I do for you? And he says, my name is Tony Shula.
Good.
He said, we control the racing here. And if you're interested in making money, let's talk. And I says, well, what do you have in mind? And he says, well, you have two favorites in today. He says, I'll give you 500 and be worse than third with both horses. So I knew what he was doing. I mean, I knew there was a whole gambling outfit, and he couldn't wait to mention that he was with Whitey Bulger and that whole crew down there, that Winter Hill gang and that whole crew, which I knew nothing about at the time. But as the days went on, I found out about it, and he kind of threatened me with that. But like I said, I grew up in that arena. I grew up there. That stuff don't faze me, especially when you know what they want to do and they want to do. And if you want to dance, that's fine. We'll dance, but you got to make it worth my while. Now, the purse money there was the purses I was racing for was $1,500 purse, which was double where I was racing. So if you win, you get 50% of the purse, and then 25% for second, 15% for third, all the way down to fifth. So if I won the race, I get 700. So I says, what do you have in mind? And he says, well, I'll give you 500, finish back out of worse than third with both horses, and I give you $1,000. So I said, look, I said, give me $1,000 for each horse. And then they pull all that wise guy shit. You know who you're talking to. I says, look, Nothing makes a difference. I says, you're going to be gambling. You're going to make the money up. If I win the race, I get $750. I says, just give me $1,000. And he says, and he said, after they try to intimidate you with all that bullshit, he counts out the money. He says, I sure hope you, just like this, I sure hope you know what you're doing, because I'll be back tomorrow morning.
Is this Shula?
This is Tony Shula saying this. Yeah, he says, I'll be back tomorrow morning. And I said, that's fine. I says, if you would bring me coffee and a buttered bagel. So he started laughing, and I finished fourth and fifth with one horse, fifth with the other horse. And he came back, and he had the coffee and a bagel. And we were sitting there, and he says, you did a good job. And he says, listen, he says, you think you can get any other guys to go along? And within a week, because these are all small tracks, everybody's broke and nobody has money. Within a week, I had 6, 7 other guys. I had my own crew, and I got a piece of all the action. And the wind up was, we wind up making a lot of money. Now, it worked out in my favor very well, because the following week I won with the horse at higher odds than they weren't the favorite no more, because I finished fourth and fifth with it. So everything worked in my favor, and it was going good. I kind of overcame the initial hate and despise I had for Tony, because he was a big guy, must have weighed 300 pounds. He had 2 guys bigger than him with him. And when they try to intimidate me, you just cannot do that to me. You can't do it. You don't impress me. If you want to work with me, I'll work with you as long as it's fair. But you're not going to turn me into a fucking mutt, Yeah. So, but I was making a lot of money with them, and then instantly they become nice. They become very nice. All of a sudden they're catering you. All of a sudden they're bringing me coffee every morning and this and that, and I'm setting everything up, and things are going really, really well. So now the meet ends. The only problem I had with him up there was he used to pull that tough guy shit, because 1 or 2 times, I give a guy 500 to be worse than third. And sometimes you get in a race and things happen where you can't help yourself, and you finish third, or you finish second. You can't help it. The horse makes a break or something happens in a race. He wants to kill these guys. I says, you can't do that. We'll make it up next time. Next time we give him nothing. He finishes. But he beat one guy really, really, really bad. And anyway, okay. So now the meet ends. And I go to Freehold. I go to Freehold Raceway from there. And I'm trying to get back to New York, because now I have a few dollars. It's been 3-4 years, and I'm trying to get closer to New York, closer to where my friends are and And I go to Freehold. They give me stalls at Freehold. That's in New Jersey. So I go to Freehold, and I'm at Freehold. I enter a couple of horses, and I call up my friend Charlie. And I let him know that I'm back in town, and he lives in New York. And I said, listen, I got a horse in 2 days. I says, come up here and bet on him. He says, Larry, I've been doing bad. I got no money. I says, look, get as much money as you can. Go borrow it, go steal it, do whatever you have to do. He says, well, I could borrow money. I said, okay, borrow. If I get beat, I'll give you the money to give to the guy. So he does that, and I win. And after I won the race, I go and I told him I'd meet him in the dining room after the race. I go into the dining room after the race, and he introduces me to the people that he borrowed the money from. The people that he borrowed the money from were Robert Cabert, that's his nickname, Basaccio Cabert, they called him, and Little Sammy. They were head of the New Jersey faction of the Gambino crew in Jersey. But Kabert was a fucking madman. He was
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
he was really, really bad. I didn't know this at the time. He just introduced me to the guy that lent him the money. What do I know? So naturally, there we're having lunch and because it was afternoon race in the freehold, and we sit down, we're having lunch, and naturally he says to me, he says, listen, anything you need, he says, just come to me, anybody, and then naturally they have to let you know that they're wise guys. He says, yeah, if you have any problem with anybody, just let me know. He says, and anything you want, you need money, you need this, you need that. Somebody's bothering you, like all that stupid wise guy bullshit. So I says, no, I'm okay, but I'm glad I met him because while I was in Lincoln Downs with Shula, he come to me one day about the second week we were there, and we were doing well together. We were getting along, and as he's leaving, he says to me, he says, listen, I got a big edge. I'm almost positive this is what he says. You got to remember, this is 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
He says, I have an edge on some hoops, I think he said. Something like that. So he says, you want some action? And all I said was, whatever you do for you, do for me. I had no idea what he was going to bet, what it was, if it was hockey, football, basketball. I have no idea. Next day, he comes to me and he gives me $3,000. So I says, what's this? He says, well, I bet for you on this game. And now I was making more betting on these games than I was fixing all these races for him. And every day he says, and I think what they were doing, they were fixing, I think it was college basketball. I'm really not sure. But I didn't care. It wasn't I didn't care because all I did, do it for me, do the same thing. So now, right near the end, we start betting, me and him together and other things. So we start getting very friendly and we start betting. Make a long story short, I start developing an addiction to gambling, sports betting. And that addiction followed me. Now I'm without Tony Shula and I'm at Freehold. But now I want to bet. So when Kabert says to me, he says, listen, if you need anything, any action, whatever you want, if you want to bet off track, I can get money off track and everything. I start betting with him. I start betting sports with him, and no problem. So, and it wasn't much. It was maybe 500 a game, 1,000 a game, something like that. And then I left Freehold and I applied for stalls at Monticello. And they gave me stalls at Monticello. Now, I was very happy at that time because Monticello was in New York. And they had 3 racetracks in New York in that area. There was Monticello, 100 miles away was Yonkers, and 20 miles away was Roosevelt. So I got my foot in the door. They let me in. I couldn't believe it, but they let me in. So now I ship up to Monticello. But by then I had the addiction. I couldn't wait now it was the football season, and I couldn't wait for Saturday. I couldn't wait for Sunday. I just couldn't wait. And I started betting. So when I got up there was a Jewish bookmaker called Barney Cutler. He was from I found out later, he was from the old Meyer Lansky crew. And he was like 80 years old, whatever he was. But he was taking action up there, basically retired, but he was taking action up there. And he gave me a $5,000 limit on any game. College, he gave me a $500 limit on college, but a $5,000 limit on the pros. And but I was also doing the race thing, and I was starting to make a lot of money. So now that was my dog.
Yeah, it's all good.
So
I just
now,
lost mine 2 months ago, but good.
So now, by then, I'm pretty addicted. I don't have to go into the weeks and the months and everything else. So I'll just skip right along.
Quick question though, when you were with Tony Shula though, because that's when I don't know if you heard me make a noise. I was about to grab an article. He tried getting Angelo Buffalino busted up at Pocono Downs. He was an FBI informant.
Yeah, he became an informant. Well, you're saying he was an informant at that time,
At
or
that time, yeah, he fingered Angelo Buffalino on 47 race fixing schemes, and Angelo beat the case, though. He got not guilty on the
but
case. On
that had to be in 75, 76.
74.
Yeah, yeah. That's when I think he went up to Detroit.
Oh yeah, well, the Pocono Downs where I'm at in Pennsylvania, that's like when that trial though was 1974 was when Shola was fingering Angelo Buffalino, Russell's cousin.
Yeah, but he
So,
was still on the loose because I believe I was that was the year that he disappeared when
yeah,
he used to run away from me because I'll get into that part of it now.
yeah,
But
yeah, 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 yeah,
I'll
yeah.
skip right along.
No, go take your time, man. Take your time.
So now I'm addicted, and I start dealing with Kabert. I said, Kabert, can you take this kind of action and everything else? Make a long story short, I'm betting now between the two of them 20,000 a game. And I'm betting 10, 11 games every week. In the college games, I'm betting 20 of them at 500 a clip. And make a long story really short, I wind up losing well over $1 million between both of them.
Ugh.
But I paid every week. Every Tuesday was pay or collect every Tuesday. And every once in a while I win. But when you're betting multiple games and you're betting parlays, and you just can't win. You just can't win. In fact, historically, I found this out later from some of the geniuses in Vegas that historically out of 15, 16 football games, the player wins 3. Historically, statistically, they win 3. So you got no chance. But when you're addicted, you're addicted. You just the more you lose, the more you want. It's always the chase. You're always chasing. So now I lose all. I'm skipping. I'm skipping ahead pretty good. So now I lose all that money, but I have my credit is astronomical with both people, both parties, and so, but I have the addiction. So I call up and I say I tell Kabert, I says, listen, I'm going to Florida for buy some property down there, so I won't be calling you, knowing that he was going to say, just call me up from Florida, the line, and that's what he said. And I did the same thing with Barney. And the same thing. Yeah, call up. I'll give you the line over the phone. Yeah, but I won't be back for 2 or 3 weeks. That's all right. No problem. I had the best credit in work because I always paid. So 3 weeks later, I owe each of them close to $400,000. And I had a choice to make at that time. I had a stable of horses at Monticello Raceway. My mother was still alive, and the choices were run away, kill myself, or go back. Well, to me, they weren't really choices, but if you put it down on paper, them are your choices. But there was no question I was going back. I was certainly not going to run away. I'm certainly not going to kill myself, and I went back. So I go back and they pick me up at the airport, and he says, "All right." He says, "You want to go home? The boss wants to see you." And I says, "I got no money." And naturally, he says, "You're going to have a major problem." And I says, "I have no money." So he makes a phone call, and he says, "Kabert wants to see you tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So next morning we drive down there. We drive down Atlantic Highlands, and he had a little cafe down there. And I walk in, and he's sitting in the back with a couple of guys, and he says to me, he don't say anything. He gets up and they walk out. Now, right down the end of the block is a big Atlantic Highlands. Is a big, I don't know what you call it, big boat basin where they have all these boats and yachts parked, and and we're following them down, and We get on a boat, and they bring me downstairs, and I was worried because there were a couple of things going through my head because everybody asked me later, especially while I was writing the book and I was getting all this information from everybody because I couldn't remember things. Weren't you afraid? Weren't you this? Weren't you that? Well, and the the thing I kept thinking about was that, geez, I lost over $1 million to these guys. They know I'm in the business where I could easily make up the money. I just took a shot at them, which if you take a shot at them right off the bat or after 2 or 3 weeks, you're dead. You're a dead man. I don't care for how much money they just leave you in the street. But the money that I lost to them, it's not that they gave me money. It's just it was a bet. Plus, they got almost $1 million of my money prior. Plus, they know that I'm in a situation where I could pay it. On the other hand, this guy's a fucking madman. This guy up to that time, I think the count was 15, 16 that he put a bullet right through their eye, right through their in between their eyes. He was nuts. He was really crazy. And so I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, after about a half hour, 40 minutes, they
But
bring
you
me
showed up though, Larry. Like you got to think, like what was going through. Like remember how you said though, and not to cut you off though, but I have to ask this. You put those 3 choices down on paper, but I mean, what were you expecting? Like you knew they weren't going to be happy, but I mean, yeah, no, you have balls, man. Like you definitely, you marched to the beat of your own drum, which I respect, though. Like I mean, to show up to guys that Burke guy is fucking nuts.
well,
you know.
I certainly wasn't going to kill myself. That's for
No,
sure.
no, 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 no. Yeah, but I'm saying a lot of people that would run away.
How do you run away? What? How do you? I
But
could
people
never
do.
do that.
No, I know that exactly. That's your mindset. But people would, some people would. I respect though what you did. That's what I'm
Well, there
telling you.
was in my mind there was no other choice. But if you want to put it on pen, what are your options? These are your 3 options. In my world, you got to go back. You just go back.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what to expect, only because if he was kind of normal, a normal wise guy, you deal with them, especially that he didn't lay out any money. It was a fucking bet. Plus, you got $1 million of my money in the last 6, 7 months. So
Yeah.
anyway, they bring me upstairs. They make me stand in this little bucket. They start pouring cement and water and mixing it, and all of that stuff. And then I thought, I says, well, maybe So anyway, I'm standing there. And now it's getting now these in my mind it could have went either way prior while I was sitting downstairs. Now that I'm upstairs standing in a bucket of cement, but what are you going to do? There's nothing you could do. And Kabert comes over
You
and he
screaming or
stands
no?
right in front of me.
You screaming? You begging or no?
No, 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 no. What the fuck? You think it's going to do any good? Don't
No,
do.
but a lot of people. I like your mindset. Go on.
No, don't do no good. The only thing is I prefer if but I couldn't say this. Kabert's method was he just shoot you right in the head, and that's instant. That's good. So I figured, but when they put me in the bucket, this is what the fuck's going on here? That's not his style.
Message.
So I was saying, well, if this happens, but that's just that he ain't gonna do that. He would just, this is all like a fucking act or something. I don't know, but these are all the things that are going through your mind. So anyway, he stands in front of me and he says, "Sammy let you go too far, and that's on him. You went too far, and that's on you. Now you tell me why I shouldn't let this cement harden and throw you the fuck overboard." And I says, "Well, I could pay." And he says, "You could pay." And then he looks at Sammy and he says, "You hear what he said? He could pay." And I have to tell you, Sammy, and it really wasn't Sammy. I keep saying Sammy, but Sammy, a few months back, went to jail. He killed somebody. He killed somebody. He got caught. He killed somebody in a holdup. He got caught. It was another one of his guys, but I just call him Sammy. He says, "Sammy, you hear what he says? He could pay." And the guy told, and Sammy said, "Right." He says, "Look, he paid every week. He says he lost a lot of money with us, and he's in a business where he could pay. So he says, all right, you could pay. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He says, you owe me 300, I think it was 360,000 or 380,000. I forget, because I owed him and I owed Barney the same amount. And he says, you can pay this 360 you owe me. I'm going to make it a Shylock loan, 2 points a week. He says, every week you come over to the club. And if I'm not here, give it to Sammy. I think it was 7,400 or 7,200. I don't remember what it was. It was close to 15,000 every week for both of them. I'm almost positive. It was 2 points on 380,000, something like that. So I said, okay, get him out of here. So they take me out. They hose me off, and that's it. They take me back home. Sammy takes me back home. And that was that. And then I went and made Barney was a whole lot easier because Barney really liked me. And he liked me for two reasons. One reason is I was seeing a girl that lived in the same complex as him. And she was his neighbor. And when I started dealing with him, I used to give her the money every week to pay him. So they got very friendly. And she used to make him breakfast and everything. And them two became like father and daughter. They were very, very close. In fact, Barney used to tell me, he used to every once in a while, I'd go up there maybe once every month or something just to see him. He wasn't doing too well. He had diabetes. And he would say, why don't you stop? Why don't you stop? You can't win. Why don't you stop? And, but when you're addicted, you can't. But anyway, at that point, I stopped. I had to stop. I couldn't bet with neither one of them anymore. And I made the same deal with Barney as I made with him. So 2 points a week for the 300, for say 15,000, whatever it was. And so every week I had to make like a minimum of $16,000 between paying them guys and living, and just living, because I used to go out every night. So that's when I started this whole thing, this race fixing thing. So one day I'm at Monticello, and the owner of the racetrack died and left his son, Charles Slutsky, in charge, left in the Nevele Hotel and Monticello Raceway. Mm-hmm. And his name was Charles Slutsky. He was my age. We became very, very, very friendly. The reason we become very, very friendly was because there was a girl up there. Her name was Monica. She was a waitress in a dining room. And I used to, when I was racing up there, every night, if I wasn't racing, even if I was racing, I'd go up to the dining room. I have my own table, A3, right up against the glass at the finish line. And she was my waitress. She liked me. Charles liked her. Wherever after the races at night, I'd always go to the Concord Hotel or the Raleigh Hotel to see the entertainment and everything. And she would show up. Wherever she went, Charles went. And before you know it, we were like three musketeers. And we became very, very, very close. And basically Charles, through the time, Charles realized what I was doing. He knew the trouble I was in, because I had to start a 3-state kite going. I had to ask permission to cash checks. I always needed cash flow all the time. Even though I was fixing races, I needed cash flow. And Charles told Schoonmaker, who was the bookkeeper, and at the information window at night when they raced, to cash a check for me anywhere, any check and I told Charles, don't put a limit on me, because sometimes I may need 10,000, sometimes I need 30 or 40, but I'll make it good. He says, okay, just don't ever bounce a check. And I never did. But the girl at the bank, Barbara, showed me how to start a 3-way kite. Now, back in them days, in the early 70s, they didn't have these computerized machines. A check took 10 days to clear. So if I open up an account, she told me open up account in New Jersey, open up one in Delaware, and one in New York, and this way you cash your check for say 10,000 in New York or in New Jersey. You have 10 days to make that check good. And then if it's getting close and you can't make it good, you cash one in Pennsylvania or Delaware for 20,000 and or cash one at the track. So I had 4 ways where I could always have cash flow. And that's what you needed to wheel and deal and scheme. So that's what I did. Well, one day, Tony Shula shows up at the track because I convinced Charles. I didn't convince him anyway. OTB was opening up for the winter meet, and the handle was going to go from 200,000 a night to maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 million a night, and they were going to open up all these OTBs in Goshen, in New York, all over the place, and I start fixing a lot of races at Monticello and having runners going to all these OTB places, and that's how I was making the money. It's a lot more involved than that, but I can't get into all that. So, and if I did run short for whatever reason, I had this kite going. I can cash a check at the racetrack, so I had the money flow and everything else. So now, who shows up one day? Tony Shula, because they were going to go during the months in December, from a week before Christmas till a week after New Year's, for that 3-4 week period, all the racetracks in the nation close because of the holidays. And but Monticello, I convinced Charles to stay open, asked the commission for them racing days to stay open, and he would get it because he owned an Everly Hotel, and all the commission guys from New York State used to stay at his hotel, so he was very friendly with them. And he gets more involved than that, but he was very friendly with them. So he got the days. So who shows up? Tony Shula. I get paged at the stable gate, and there's Tony Shula with his 2 guys in his big black Cadillac. And I said, what the hell are you doing here? Now, I didn't want to chase him, but I was doing my own thing. I kind of had it covered. I didn't need him anymore, but I couldn't just chase him because he got me off the snide. We made a lot of money together. So I said, what are you doing here? He says, it's the only game in town. What do you think I'm doing here? So I says, look, I says, I'll meet you later. I met him later, and I told him, I says, listen, this is going to be a limited thing for 3-4 weeks. He says, the handle's going to be good because of OTB and this and that. But after that, don't go crazy. But after that, you got to get out of here. So yeah. So anyway, we did it. We made a lot of money. Now when the winter meet ended, and all the racetracks around the country opened, the handle went back down to nothing, where it was a struggle for me. But during that time, the Charles Susky got a hold of me, and he says the racing commission called me up, and they wanted to know if I had somebody to train Manny Ukaza to drive harness horses. Manny Ukaza was a jockey, a Hall of Fame jockey, that got in a wreck at Santa Anita, I think it was, in California, and broke both his knees, so he could never ride again. But he loved the horse business, and he wanted to learn how to drive. So I said, sure, I'll teach him. So Manny Ukaza wound up living with me for almost a year, and I got him his license. I put him on a couple of winners. In fact, he got write-ups. I have all the write-ups. He got write-ups and everything that he won harness racing. So one day, I'm trying to figure out how I could make a score. And Manny was living at my house, and we used to talk a lot about how much he missed thoroughbred racing, and that all the jockeys that were there, he basically trained them, and he knew them all and everything. And he talked a lot about Con Erico. And Con Erico was about the same age as Manny, and he was he was older, and he used to get these 100-to-1 shots to ride as his career was coming to an end. And he used to hang out in a place. I can't remember the name of the place. It's in my book. And so I asked Manny, I says, how well do you know Khan? And he says, I know him like we're brothers. So I says, he hangs out in this place. He says, why don't we go see him? Now, my plan was I was going to ask Khan, who I knew was broke and needed money. I was going to ask Khan how well he knew Cordero, Baeza, and all them guys that were leading riders at Aqueduct and Belmont. But I couldn't let Manny know that was my plan. I just says, let's go visit. We'll go out to eat one night. We'll go to this restaurant where he hangs out. So we went there. And when Manny went to the bathroom, I says to Khan, I says, listen, you here every night, right? He says, yeah. I says, tomorrow night, I want to talk to you, but I can't talk to you in front of Manny. He says, I got something that you might be interested in. He says, okay. So sure enough, the next night I go back there. And I say, listen, how well do you know all these guys at Aqueduct and Belmont? He says, I know them like they're my sons. I says, and I tell him the plan. And the plan is this. I says, listen, I says, if you go up to, I'll just use these names. If you go up to Cordero and say, listen, you got the favorite in this race. If I give you $5,000 cash, could you be worse than third? What would he say? He says, he'd take the 5,000. I says, and the same thing with Baeza, and I went down the list. I says, who were 4 or 5 guys that you could really, really trust that would do the job, that are named jockeys? And he makes the list. I says, all right, here's the deal. First and second choice, they get 5,000 apiece. Third and fourth choice, they get 2,500 apiece. For each one that you get out, you get $1,000. So let's just say in the first race, you got four guys out. 2 get 5,000 each. That's 10,000. The other 2 get 2,500 each. That's 5,000. You get 1,000 for each of them. That's $4,000 you're going to get. Now, if you could do 2 or 3 races a day, or even 2 a day, you're going to make yourself $8,000 a day. If you can get 5 of them out or 3 of them out, whatever, you get $1,000. That was the deal. So I says, you think you can do it? And he said, yeah. So he goes to the track, talks with them. He says, we can do it. Okay. So without getting into the particulars, that was the deal I made. Now, Tony Shula comes, and he don't want to leave. He don't want to leave. He has no place to go. He says they no handle there and this and that. So I says, okay. And it was probably good for me because I kind of thought it out. I can't run a 20-horse racing stable and stay at Monticello and handle this whole thing. So I'll make Tony Shula, and I met with Tony Shula and I met with Khan and told him the whole deal and everything else. And the deal was that Tony would stay with him in a hotel right off the Long Island Expressway in Corona, right by Aqueduct Racetrack and 10 miles from Belmont. And every day at 12 o'clock in the morning, Khan would go there, set up whatever he had to set up, come back to the hotel like 10 o'clock when the track closed for exercise. And he would say, okay, I got this. And Tony would call me up in my office at Monticello and tell me. Now, the deal was Tony would bet. And now here's the deal. So we had to make up, let's say it cost me between everything $20,000. We'll just use $20,000 to pay off 5,000, 2,500, 2,500, and 4,000 for Khan. So, and then, so that it cost me for the setup $20,000. All I wanted, and then it would cost me $20,000 to box the remaining horses in trifecta races or exacta races. Try to get trifecta races. So all I wanted to do was double my money. That's all. Cost me $20,000 to set it up. Cost me $20,000 to box the other horses for enough money to get my. And most of the time, probably the average 80,000, 90,000 in winnings that we were able to take out of the windows, because for the most part, the first and second choice were out of it. And it was easy for them jockeys to come back and say, yeah, to the trainer, yeah, he just wasn't good today. All the bullshit that they give him. He just wasn't good today. And then the trainer goes crazy, having the vet come and scope him when nothing was really wrong with the horse. But that was the deal. So now, Tony would call me every day with 2 races. Most of the time it was 2 races. And I would have my runners go to OTB and everything else. And that's a whole other story. That's a whole movie in itself, because you got to send seasoned gamblers to OTB or any place when you're betting that kind of money, and you can't get shut out. You have to know what you're doing. And when you go to collect, there's always security there, or the manager. You're winning maybe 30, 40,000, because I would split them up. I'd send them to 2 or 3 different locations. But if you win $20,000, $30,000, and the favorites are out, that sometimes the manager would come over to you and say, look, we don't have that much on hand. Can we give you a check? I always told them, take the check. And then they're going to start questioning you. How'd you pick these numbers? And tell them to go fuck themselves. Hey, listen, I've been betting my whole life. I finally make a fucking score, and you want to give me get the fuck out of here. You got to answer them like that so they don't bother you. And then make sure they never go back to that same place. Switch them around. Send them to Westchester. Send them wherever you have to send them. So I'm leaving a lot out, but I'm trying to get, because it's a long story. So that was it. So then there come a time when the phone calls were coming every other day instead of every day. But I figure, the fat fuck, he's a fucking snake. He's gonna do the fucking bullshit things. I was a little surprised at Khan, because he knew I was with Mikasa. You'd think he would call me up and say, I had this, but he never said nothing. He never said nothing. He would follow Tony's. But I think Khan also had 1 or 2 guys that he was friendly with, mob guys from Staten Island, which I didn't give a fuck. I didn't care. You got your own friends. I didn't think you were going to keep this 100% secret. I can't control it. I can't be with you every minute of every day. But I told him, I says, look, I know, try to keep it amongst us, because you tell too many people, the payoffs are going to be bad, and we're going to stop before anybody goes to jail. So, but I knew they were 1 or 2 guys in Staten Island that he was very close with, that he was telling mob guys. I didn't care. I didn't want to know who they were. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Just make sure you call me every day. Well, Fatso, the phone calls started to stop. So now I was getting calls every other day. Then it turned to every 3rd day, and then just shitty stuff. And then there come a time when he didn't call me. He didn't call me for a week. I still had to come up with $15,000 a week, and because of that, I'm kind of slacking off a little bit. And even if I wasn't, it's tough to win that kind of money at Monticello with no handle. Even if you fix a race, you win a few $1,000s. It don't make it. So what happened was, I start reaching out and everything. The kites are going like crazy. I'm sending this poor girl to Philadelphia or Delaware to put the money in the bank for this, running back, doing it, going crazy. Now it becomes a bookkeeping nightmare, and trying to keep up and trying to catch up. Then one day, a couple of races that I fixed, the guy run over the money. You can't get mad. It wasn't their fault. They couldn't help it. And you get really jammed up. So Charlie, my friend Charlie, one of my runners, he comes to me one day and he says, listen, he says, I have a shot to get some counterfeit money. Here's what it looks like. Look like a brand new bills, brand new. And they're all 20. I think they were 20s. Brand new. Look great. I couldn't tell the difference. Yeah. So he says there was some guy, I hope I remember the name right. I think it's in the book. From the crew in Philadelphia, the guy called the Crow. I forgot his name.
Nicky.
Yeah. The Crow. He was with the boss down there. That little guy. Scarpo. Yeah. And I says, all right. I says,
Caramandi.
That was the Crow.
Nicky the Crow Caramandi.
Yeah. He was fucking around with counterfeit money.
Yeah.
So I bought $100,000 worth. I think for 10,000 I think for 10,000. I'm not really sure, 10 to 20,000. But anyway, got 100,000 worth, and I gave them to the runners. And I said, look, just mix it in with this. Be careful what you do. Da, 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 da. And then we had one or two tellers that we became friendly with, that they become friendly with, that we give them 10% of the action, and they took the counterfeit money. They never said nothing. But, you had to be very careful. You just had to be careful. And we were. And we never got in trouble with the counterfeit money, but Charlie did. Charlie tried to buy a car with counterfeit money. He winds up going to jail.
Yeah.
So now one of my best runners is in jail. So in what the Terra, some jail, it was like 10 hours away, and I had to drive his wife and the kids up there. Terra, something like that. So I go up there one time, and he says, "Listen, there's somebody I want you to meet." So he brings me over Frank Cullotta. Now, Frank Cullotta was the button guy for Spilotro, that guy that you got right on your left shoulder there.
Yep.
And they were in Vegas at the time, but Frank was in jail at the time. And he says, "Yeah, Charlie told me about your problem." And he says, "I think I could help you." So we talked for a while. He says, "Listen, I get out," I think he said, in 4 weeks. He says, "Here's my mother's number." He says, "Call me." So I call him. In the meantime, Shula still never called. And now I'm starting to get a little jammed up, going crazy. And he says, "Listen," he says, "you have to come out here." So I fly out to see him. He says, "We have to go see Spilotro. He's in Vegas." He says, "I'm not allowed to fly. I'm on paper, but he ain't going to do nothing without me. He ain't going to see you, and he ain't going to do nothing without me. So I got to take the chance. We have to go out there, because this is a big deal." So we go out there. We sit with him, with Spilotro, and everything like this happened right. And I'm almost positive it was a Stardust Hotel. They started taking horse bets, a horse room. They started, and there were a couple of bookmakers that when Spilotro got out there, he chased them from the immediate Vegas out of town, and he put his own bookmakers there. So when I told Spilotro that these were fixed races, guaranteed races, and everything, we can make a lot of money, he says, "Okay." He says, we'll find that fat fuck." So he brings me, what the hell was his name? Blitzstein or some, I forgot the names. The big guy, gigantic guy. He gives me Howard, I forgot, Blitzstein, a big mobster, one of his guys, and two other guys. And we come back, and I tell him the whole story. I tell him what they will look like, this, that, and everything else. And after they're in town about a week, and they find him. They find him, go to a hotel, and they just says, they put a gun up his mouth, almost went through the roof of his mouth. "This can't happen no more. Make sure this and this and this and this," because now it's not only Larry. Now Spilotro's involved. This is involved. And I don't care who you're with. Nothing makes a difference. You got to do it, because one day without a call, there's going to be a problem. So everything went great for about 4 more weeks. And then everything is going good. Spilotro's making a ton of money, and he wind up busting out his own bookmakers, because they had to come back to him to borrow money to bet. So he was charging his bookmakers 1 point for money that he was, and then he busted out everybody. So anyway, that was that. So now they go back. Everything is going good. The minute they go back, the same shit started to happen. But it was at the end, because when the guys went back, they let him know, "We're going back. Make sure this don't happen, because we'll come right back." Well, what Shula did then, He went up to Detroit. And I think I got this right. He went up to Detroit, and at the time, the FBI, whoever it was, they had that because the Detroit mob owned Hazel Park, and they were fixing races there and everything, and they were zeroing in on them. And who shows up? Fat Tony Shula trying to get involved there, and Tony Shula got caught up in the whole thing. So that's what I was told from Conorico later. That and you know the windup was and nobody well, they do know it now because it was on my podcast. Conorico, I had a kid working for me called Dominic DeCerio. He worked for me. His brother is a very good friend of mine. I never knew that they were related. When they heard my podcast, now this was in the 70s and 80s. I haven't seen them guys in years. Now when I had my podcast and I'm telling this story, just like I'm telling you, they contact me and they say, Connor's my uncle. And he went to jail. He never ratted. Shula ratted on everybody.
Oh, everybody, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't get me because I really believed that two things. I think they wanted Whitey Bulger plus all the information on the Winter Hill Gang and everything else that he can give. And then I believe, because this is what Conto said, that he was thinking of writing a book. He wanted to make it like he was the one that orchestrated this whole thing, when in reality, how the fuck did a piece of shit like him, who was fixing races and at Suffolk Downs and them little tracks, how did he wind up at Belmont and Aqueduct with the dealing with the top jockeys in the country? So it had to be through me and through Con. But he never said nothing, and I was worried about that because I figured they would come to me. But the truth of that matter is that in all my dealings with him, there was only 3 months at Lincoln Downs where we were together every single day. After that, I never even seen him no more. And he had like a 1.5, 2-year run without me, but he wanted to make believe like he was going to write a book and it was all him, and because he became a government witness. And so anyway,
but people had this big misconception with Whitey Bulger and the Winter Hill Gang. Though it wasn't Whitey Bulger, it was Howie Winter, and the Winter Hill Gang was done in '78 when Howie Winter though got put away, and then Bulger's, and then they moved over to the Lancaster Street Garage though. But the newspapers kept writing it up as the Winter Hill Gang, but it was really Howie Winter who was the head of the Winter Hill Gang, and then Whitey.
I don't know.
But I'm saying though, people always think, oh, Whitey Bulger ran the Winter Hill Gang. No, he really didn't. It was Howie Winter. Who ran it, and Shula was the one because he was friends with Buffalino, and they would come down here. And then this one author made up a BS story who wrote The Quiet Dawn about Russell, saying that Tony Shula and that Russell Buffalino and Whitey Bulger split 50-50 at the racetrack in 1974, which never could have happened because Howie was running it though at the time. Howie, if you ever hear of Howie Winter?
I heard the name, in the last 5-6 years because I got involved in all this stuff. Back then when it happened in 71, 70, whenever it was, I didn't even know who Whitey Bulger was. I didn't know, I didn't care, I didn't want to know. All I wanted to do was my thing. And then when we start making money, all I had to do, the only person I had to know was Fat Tony. And the only time he ever mentioned anything else was when the first day I met him, and when he says, I'm almost positive he said the Winter Hill Gang, but I could be wrong.
He could have, though. No, in that time frame, yeah, absolutely. If it was the 70s,
all he says is that we control all the racing around here and we fix the races.
Which they did, and Howie went away in '78, though, absolutely. And Whitey was around. It's just though that he didn't become boss really until Howie though took off.
I don't know. I can't say for sure. All I know is that they didn't say much when Shula came in, and then they went off to the side. And then a while later, Shula told me, he says, I got to be careful now. I busted out all the bookmakers and they got mad and I had to come up because they were found out that
it had to have been him.
he
Yeah.
had to give him 40 or 50,000 or something like that,
Yeah.
which he made. So that okay, so now he gets pinched up there in at Hazel Park. He's away. I sweated it out for a while, and then I realized that they weren't going to come to me, and that even if they did, they really. Once I found out that Connor Rico was the one that could have really hurt me, but he went to jail, and he did. I think he did 4, 5, 6 years.
You're good, Larry. Keep going.
He did 4 or 5, 6 years, and he come out of jail, and he did it. He did an interview with his family, and he talked about all of this. He got pinched. I still had to come up with my 15, 16,000 a week, and I got lucky one day when I met. Oh jeez. Nicky Barnes.
Nicky Barnes.
Nicky Barnes. And how I met Nicky Barnes was that every night I used to go to the Concord Hotel after the races, and I always had my own table in the main room, right up front, and in the lounge. I had a table for 6 right up against the stage in the lounge. I think they had the biggest lounge in the country. So with great entertainment.
Yeah.
So the maitre d', who I knew very well, comes to me one night, and he says, Larry, he says, I have some old friends from the neighborhood. I'd like you to meet them. Maybe you could help them out. So he brings me outside to the lobby, and who's there? Nicky Barnes and Jazz, Leon Batts, and one other guy. I can't remember. And naturally, I knew who they were, and I knew Nicky Barnes. And they said that they had a problem. They came up, they tried to get rooms, and they came up for the weekend to see Natalie Cole, which was her opening act ever, on the road, and they couldn't get seats. They couldn't. It was sold out, and they were at the Raleigh Hotel. Now the Raleigh Hotel was owned by Manny Halbert, and I had horses with Manny, and I knew him well. So I called up, and naturally I got them seats, and I got them rooms and everything, and after it was all over, they came to me. I told them I'd be at the racetrack, and they came. I got them a table in the dining room, and I was in the last race that day. And I told them, I says, all right, I have to leave now. I'm in the last race. Then they says, okay, what do we, want to do something? I said, no, there's no handle here. You can't bet. You can't do nothing. So just don't bet. Don't just either leave or just watch the race. I let them know I fixed the race.
Yeah.
So they did, and they says, okay, you going to the Concord tonight? And I said, yes. He says, okay, we'll see you there. We're going to stay, and then we're leaving in the morning. So when I get to the Concord that night, they says, listen, he says, I can get down $5,000 a position off track, because you couldn't bet on track because they don't handle any money. You make a $200 bet, and let's go from 10 to 1 to 9 to 5. So I says, there's no way in the world any bookmaker in the world is going to take a bet on the Trotters, much less from Monticello Raceway, much less $5,000. It's impossible. It can't happen. So he says, Larry, he says, we bet more than $1 million every weekend on sports with Fat Tony Salerno.
So, yeah.
He says, and they'll give me whatever I want. And I says, they're not going to give you this. So he says, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. He calls me the next day, and he says, I got it. Just what I said. So I drive down there. He had a garage. In fact, the garage is where the garage used to be is Al Sharpton's building right now. I think it's 100 and I forgot. I forgot what's 117. I forgot. But wherever Al Sharpton's building, that used to be Nicky Barnes' garage. And he told me, he says 5,000 a position, track odds. He says, and that's it. So now I had to change my whole schedule because now I need a horse to win, and that's when I started switching horses because I needed a horse to win. So I would take, like, just as an example, if the race was a $3,000 claiming race, I would bring a horse in that looked similar. That was a much better horse, like a $10,000 claimer that looked similar. I would give the equipment guy 500. Just let him know. Look, just pass this horse by, and don't check, make believe the tattoo because they got to check the tattoos. So I had the equipment guy paid off. I had and that's how I win the race because I had a horse that was a 10,000 claimer in for 5, and that's the horse we bet 5,000 a position on. Not only that, but I would send 2 or 3 of my runners up to the track and give them 200 each to bet on other horses in the race and to make my odds go up. So we had a whole thing going, and that lasted for made a lot of money. And that lasted about 3-4 months. And then one day they got pinched and they all went to jail. And that was the end of that. And then the time came where I couldn't do it no more. Everything was starting to cave in. I just couldn't do it. It was like between the years that I spent living on tack room floors in the dirt. Then when I got lucky at Lincoln Downs, I got lucky at Freehold, I got lucky and losing millions of dollars and wheeling and dealing and scheming and
day by day, you just don't know. Like you don't know what's like. You're not.
It kind of gets to you. And I was getting tired.
Yeah.
But not only getting tired, I couldn't keep it up. I couldn't keep it up. The racing. Charles Slutsky died, my mentor. The guy who allowed me to cash checks, the guy who, if I ever got jammed up, I say, Charles, give me 30,000 until tomorrow. And he died. And I knew that once he died, the racing commission was going to come down on me because he held them back. And so anyway, I go to Cabert. I drive down and I said, listen, I says, I've been giving you 7,000, 7,200, whatever it was, for a week now for 3-4 years. I says, you got more, 10 times more than what I owe. Things are closing in. Before I'm barred for life, we have to make a deal. You got to stop the VIG. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, but I got to tone it down a lot. And I'll give you as much money as I can every week until I pay it off, but no more VIG. And he agreed. So that was a tough deal. And I made the same deal with Bonnie. So I didn't have to worry about the VIG.
Did it go down though with Cabert like that, like the way how you just said it to me, or did it take a lot of convincing?
Well, let me tell you what happened. The first week I go down there with 4,000 or 5,000. It was all right, and but don't forget I owe him over 300,000.
Yeah.
And then the next week I go down there with 1,800, and it really wasn't working. But I says, look, if I push any more, I'm going to wind up in jail. I'm going to wind up losing my license. I'm going to wind up everything, So, but what happened was, Barbara calls me up, and she says, Bonnie's not doing well. You got to come over here. So I go over the house, and he's not doing well. He's like 85, 80 years old, whatever he is, and he's not doing well. And I says, come on, Bonnie, let me take you to the hospital. No, I'll be okay. So I leave. A few days later, she calls me up and says, Larry, he's having trouble breathing. He can't breathe. He can't do this. And she's staying with him now. She's in his apartment because she lived next door. So I go over there, and He's, I call an ambulance. They take him to the hospital, and a day later he dies. So now I says, how, what are we going to have to bury him? I guess he has no family, he has nothing. And she says, well, she says, he left me everything in his apartment. He left me everything. And he told me that in the closet, there's a piece of like a fake wall. He says, just pull that board away. He says, there's some money there. That's for you. So she says, whatever it is, we could use that to bury him. I says, okay. So we go there, and there's almost $500,000 in
Jesus.
behind that, and we took the money and we buried him. I paid off Gabert. This was in October of 1978. I paid off Gabert. Me and Ho went to Florida. We went to Vegas. We come back, and I was even with the world.